And I know you don't know my kids, but you tell me how often I get to see them.
I couldn't imagine that.
And it's like putting that sort of responsibility into a stranger's hands.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I would want to risk that. I would want to say in how often I get to see my kids, even if it's not completely what I want.
Sure. And nobody's ever, especially when it's a contested dispute, nobody's ever happy.
In divorces, just in general, nobody ever leaves happy. It's just and it's funny because a lot of people in the judicial system that deal with divorces will say that if both parties leave unhappy, then it's then it's fair. It's a fair deal probably.
Legal chaos.
Legal chaos.
Legal chaos. Legal chaos.
Legal chaos.
Legal.
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 Legal
Chaos.
chaos.
It's legal chaos.
All right, episode 15015, Legal Chaos, coming at you. We've got a special guest today. We've got Lauren Davenport, who is the head of the family law department here at Gounaris Abboud. She has been a lawyer for the last 15 years. She's a local Daytonian, Carroll High School Patriots, probably in the marching band. No? I wanted to put that in there. I thought you were maybe in the marching band. And, of course, the University of Dayton Law. I've known Lauren for a really, really long time. I knew her before she was a lawyer. Super hard worker. She loves what she's doing. And the reason we thought we'd bring Lauren onto the podcast today was because, we've been doing a lot of things about criminal law and OVI and rights and things, but Lauren does a completely different area of practice. She handles all of the divorce work, the dissolution, the custody, the post-degree matters, and there are a lot of myths, beliefs, ideas that many people have a lot of misconceptions about when it comes to this. And so we thought it'd be a good idea to bring her on. So first and foremost, Lauren, welcome to Legal Chaos.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, you were our first choice at episode 1, but because of your calendar, your unavailability, now that we finally got you here, I'm very excited to kind of get into what we describe here today's episode as legal chaos of divorce and family law. And I will tell you, Nick, we've talked about criminal matters. We've talked about Mangione, DUI cases. We had Michael Wright here. We've talked about all the spectacles that he's been involved in handling the NHL. But I would say, with respect to family law and custody, that is more chaotic in the legal world than I think anything else. And when you talk about two people that want to separate two human beings that are using swords and using the shield of their lawyers and then have children involved in the middle. I mean, if somebody tried to take your child away from you, you would do whatever you feasibly can. So what Lauren does is she is a shielder, she's a protector, she's a fighter of her clients in this chaotic area of practice that is so emotional to so many people. And I want to start off with kind of the biggest myth that people think in general, kind of what I see, what people ask me, and is the notion that if a spouse cheated, do they win? If I cheated, do I win in a divorce? And you would think common sense wise, yeah, you just caught your significant other. You've been married, you have children, you just caught him in the act, and you're going to go to a lawyer, and all of a sudden you're going to win this big pile of settlement. You're going to get the children away from them. But that's not the case, is it, Lauren?
No, it's not. It doesn't matter.
Why not? I mean, the common sense.
Yeah. The a lot of people that come and I have consultations with bring that up, and they want some sort of benefit at the end of it, and the court doesn't care. I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to equitably divide their assets and their debts, and it's not going to make a difference, unfortunately.
You know, for the purposes of this episode, and we're primarily based in the state of Ohio, and for the purpose of this episode, we're going to focus on how Ohio law treats these types of cases, but family law varies dramatically from state to state. Rules regarding property division, spouse support, custody, divorce can be very different depending on where you live. And we talk about equitable distribution in Ohio, as you mentioned, is a no-fault state, but it's also a community property state, right?
Correct.
So even if somebody commits adultery and there's a marital asset valuation of $1 million, it doesn't matter who is the cheater on this case. They're splitting that down the middle, 50-50. Is that accurate? I mean, there's other factors involved, but the person who committed adultery, they're not gonna leave any money on the table, because Ohio says, well, even though infidelity is a grounds for divorce, your award is not going to be any different than anyone else's.
Yeah, you don't. The adulterer doesn't get penalized because of that, for that specific reason. Now, if there is information that would suggest that somebody that's been unfaithful has used marital assets to fund another relationship, then that could come into play, and they could maybe be responsible if they've run up a credit card and that credit card debt solely funds another relationship. Then the court could find that whoever committed adultery would be responsible for paying that. They wouldn't make the aggrieved spouse pay anything. But
so as far as like marital debt, if that is a marital debt that's accumulated based upon the adulterer having this other relationship, that's one way to try to use that to have some advantage to kind of offset some debt that you're not gonna reward the adulterer for
half of the value of a house, or no, that doesn't happen. But if you can show that hotel rooms were paid for or dinners were paid for that that went toward funding that other relationship, then that could come into play.
Lauren, when says the elder statesman here, and this is even before I was a lawyer, but I heard of these. It seemed like there used to be a time where there were a lot of private investigators that used to be involved in,
right.
And we see it in movies, right? You see people out there with the camera and they're taking pictures. That changed. What does that mean? Like, what do we do in Ohio? They now call it no fault, right? What does that mean?
So Ohio is a hybrid state with respect to divorce action. So there are. In order to file for divorce, you have to state grounds. And the two no-fault grounds in Ohio are incompatibility, if two people have irreconcilable differences that would lead them to need to separate, or if they've been living separate and apart for more than a year. Those are the two reasons that you can go to court and say, hey, we're incompatible, or we've lived separate apart for more than a year, and I want to get divorced. So that would be the no-fault part of it. There's also, though, grounds that you can state, like adultery or drunkenness or gross neglect of duty or extreme cruelty. Those things can also be alleged in a divorce action, but those are items that you're going to have to prove.
Right. So when you have to prove it, that's just more things that the lawyer has to do, right? Yeah. So you have a choice or you have an option. Oh, my goodness, you know what? Someone's going to come in, Lauren, and they're going to say, my husband or my wife, they're a no good. They drink all the time.
Is that incompatible?
I mean, you could look at it as incompatible. I'll tell you that.
Dumb it down for me. What would be incompatible?
So I've had cases where somebody will come in and say, we are compatible.
Okay.
Like they've been served with a complaint for divorce, right?
Yeah.
Someone's suing them for divorce and they're saying we are incompatible. Incompatible, right? Because
Okay.
that's what you allege. Hey,
Yeah.
my spouse and I are incompatible. They've been served with that lawsuit and now they have to respond and they're saying, wait a minute, we are compatible. I don't
Right.
agree with that. Well, the court, I mean, I've had discussions about it, and the court pretty much says, well, just you saying that you are compatible and them saying you're not compatible
Oh
shows
my
incompatibility.
God. Okay, that's ridiculous. So, for the audience, divorce cases are civil cases. So, and I just did a video on this, what the difference between the criminal and civil. Civil cases, you have a plaintiff and a defendant. Now, who gets to decide who wants to be the plaintiff in divorce cases, Lauren?
Well, the plaintiff is whoever files first.
Okay, what's the advantage? People say, and there's been movies out there. I don't know who got served. There's a bunch of movies out there, right, where there's investigators are trying to hunt down somebody, and they get beat up, and they bring out this paperwork. They're like, "You've been served." Does it make a difference? Do you get any advantage by filing first?
So that's a question also that I get a lot, and I generally know that there's not a difference. If there are circumstances when you file a lawsuit for divorce against your spouse, you can file additional motions along with that, right? So that the court can address, hey, what's going to happen with custody of our kids while this case is going on? So it allows you to maybe get your voice into the court earlier than the other person.
Yeah.
But the court usually doesn't make a decision about those sort of things or temporary things while the case is pending until both parties have an opportunity to weigh in.
Is it almost like a moral victory, like, when two spouses are trying to jab at each other and the one says, well, I filed a divorce against you?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely. It's like it's like principle, right?
So, and you mentioned adultery is, again, you talked about incompatibility. You talked about the minimum standard for that and living separate and apart. What's the point of somebody if you don't get an advantage? And then you talked about some financially relevant if you can show the debt was used to finance this great trip you had with your adulterer girlfriend or boyfriend. But what advantage does one have by claiming infidelity and adultery?
I think just if they're successful in proving that had occurred and that the divorce is granted based on that ground, then I think that really all it is for lack of a term, bragging rights, or it comes down to principle, right? That they're holding a piece of paper that says the court divorced you because you were unfaithful. What does it get you? Nothing. Yeah. It gets you the ability to be able to say that, I guess.
Should in your take on this, and I'm gonna put you on the spot. Should it have a larger role in a divorce? Should adultery have a larger role? What do you take? What's your take on it?
I don't think so. My opinion is that I don't think that it should play a bigger role. I think it almost would muddy the waters even more, right?
Yeah.
Because at what point in time is it more egregious in one circumstance versus another? So,
it's hard to standardize it, right?
Well, these proceedings are already so emotional. They're so driven by emotion that it's like that's just one added level to it, that if you can remove that, it just makes it that much easier to try to get you past it and through this whole process.
Especially when children are involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, just a little bit off topic, but I think it's an important one that people sometimes, you get a lot of phone calls. People are saying, I want to divorce my husband. I can't stand him. I got to leave my wife. Can't stand her. Someone calls you and says, you know what? I've taken the kids. I've left the house. Mm-hmm. What's the first thing you think about that? Is that a good move?
I think that it would depend on all of the reasons why they left, right? If there's legitimate reasons, if they're escaping some sort of abuse,
Sure.
then
course.
that would, I think, be a legitimate reason that you would want to get your kids out of that circumstance. Or just sometimes it's just the toxic environment of living with your spouse. And I have had cases, I mean, I have them all the time, where spouses still try to live together, maintain under the same roof with kids while
Yeah.
they're going through a divorce. And it just, I mean, a lot of times it ends up being more toxic, and it'd be better if they separated. But usually if a spouse does leave with kids, if a divorce is filed relatively quickly, then the court's going to weigh in about, hey, what's going to happen with these kids? What's the order going to be as far as who gets to see the kids when, while this case is going on?
Would a court think, okay, you got to, let's say the mother takes the kids and the court's going to weigh in on it, and they say, well, where are you going to live with these kids? And now all of a sudden, I'm not sure if that's a great place. They go back with dad. Isn't that, can that be a possibility? And is, leaving that marital home, leaving that place where the kids are comfortable, the school district and all that.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't leave the marital home, is because they want to be able to be that safe spot. They want to be that person that gets to stay there, possibly with the kids.
Yeah.
Or would that give them maybe an upper advantage as far as custody, because maybe the court doesn't want to remove kids from a house that they're used to and that they're comfortable in. So I think, all of that comes into play.
I mean, that's also, in Ohio, asking for exclusive use, right? Like if one person leaves, and then all of a sudden you're asking the court to designate exclusive use to one spouse or the other. You're in a tough spot.
Well, and in Ohio too, one spouse either spouse, I guess, can ask for exclusive use of the marital residence while the case is pending. So that is a thing that you can ask for. However, there are parameters. You can't just ask for it and immediately get it. So usually the other person, this spouse, has to be absent voluntarily from the house for more than 30 days.
Yeah.
Or there has to be some sort of like a toxicity in the environment in the house, whether or not it's mental abuse or physical abuse or whatever, that would warrant the court saying, okay, one spouse can have possession of the house while the case is pending. But some people try to put those in like the initial orders and hope that the court will overlook them. But yeah.
I think that, one of the things when people they get married, a lot of people get married young, or they've been with somebody their whole life, and, you think about the marriage ceremony, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, till death do us part, right? Mm-hmm. And every marriage, there's certain roles occur. Hey, by the way, I'm going to go work. I'll provide the health insurance. You do this. You focus on raising the kids. And you've got long marriages.
15, 20-year marriage.
Yeah, big, long marriages. These are, and when you think about as an adult, this is basically the adult lifetime. This is what a person knows as their lifetime as an adult. And all of a sudden it comes crumbling.
Yeah.
People come to you, Laura, and they're like, oh my goodness, I need to get out. I need to divorce him. Maybe I'm not working, but my husband or my spouse has controlled all the money. Mm-hmm. How do you advise people who might not have had that role? I'm not making money. They're the one making money. This is my role.
I don't know where the accounts are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times, the stay-at-home, and again, there's nothing wrong with it. My spouse controlled all the money, but in every household, there's duties. The stay-at-home mom
Everybody does things differently.
Everybody does things differently, and it's not uncommon for one spouse or the other. I'm not trying to be sexist, but it doesn't matter who, whatever the sex is, whether it's the stay-at-home dad or a stay-at-home mom. But there's circumstances, and it's not uncommon for the other spouse to say, well, I don't even know who's our lender. I don't know how many credit cards we have. I don't know how many checking accounts we have. I don't know where the tax returns come in. I just sign them electronically.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like a disaster.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that, just individuals in general have come a long way probably in the last 40 or 50 years, the chance of having two parents in a household at work is a bit more prominent. But
course,
with that
yeah.
stay-at-home
That's a good
parent,
point.
it does still happen. And there are occasions where people will come in and they say, well, all I know is that I have a credit card that I'm allowed to spend on, and then my spouse pays for it each month. And as long as there's money there, I go to the grocery, and I have these duties and responsibilities, and I don't have to worry about the money. The process, though, is still the same, right? We still have to go through the whole filing for divorce and stuff like that. But it's scary because, luckily some of these people are able to have family or friends that they can lean on if they need to get out of a situation quickly. But we can also, depending on the financial situation, ask for the court for maybe their spouse to pay some additional money for them to be able to at least have the same sort of benefit of legal representation than their spouse that does make all the money have. Because some of these people do come out and they literally have nothing because they're dependent on their spouse for any sort of financial means.
This office had a case years ago, and I think this was before you worked here, Lauren, but we got hired in a situation where a spouse, same scenario, stayed home, and she gets this credit card, and the credit card says you can use it and buy whatever you want with it. Well, buy whatever you want except for pay for your attorney fees. So she came in, she hired our firm, she used the credit card that she's been on. Now, credit card's got, her husband's name on it, but she's an authorized user. Mm-hmm. She thought she was. She hires us. We file the complaint. The complaint gets served. An answer gets filed, and then we get a letter from opposing counsel. What do you think the opposing counsel said? What do you think he threatened her with?
For fraud for using the card?
For fraud for using the card. So we immediately refunded the funds because we didn't want her to get in any trouble. And then we addressed this with the court. Afterwards, the court says, wait a minute, you gave her that card. Mm-hmm. She has been accustomed to using that card. So not only did we get our money, but we also got some temporary spousal support in the meantime because she's been accustomed to that.
Yeah.
So hopefully, there's some hope for people who are in that situation to get remedy. But that was a disaster for this poor woman. We felt so bad for her that we said, we'll refund the money back to the credit card company, but we're going to still represent you because we believe we're in the right. Yeah. We believe that you need relief. And this person, just because he has all the money, doesn't mean that he can control you and bully you through this process.
Yeah.
So we fired right back to the other lawyer. In fact, just to close out the story, there was a prenup agreement, and a prenup didn't really give her a whole lot. But we were able to show, and there was some case law, that the prenup was signed under duress, and we showed proof of that. That basically invalidated the prenup because one of the things that you can't sign a prenup was under duress, and it was pretty. There were some witnesses that we were able to show that it was right before the marriage. He sticks this piece of paper from her, and he's like, "You got to sign this thing." Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Well, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to get married." She's like, "No, you got to sign it now." And she signed it, and we were able to prove that. So she ended up getting a very nice settlement to conclude that story.
Yeah.
But what you would do, talk about how you as the lawyer maneuvering through this period. We know that the parties are required to give full disclosure. How's that work?
So in Ohio, when somebody files for divorce, they have just different forms and affidavits that they have to fill out. One of those documents is something that's called like an affidavit of income and expenses, or an affidavit of financial disclosure. And what it does is it makes you list what your income is and any information about the income of your spouse, if you do know. It also has you list out your assets as well as your debts. So that document gets filed along with the complaint for divorce, and then the spouse, once they get served, has a period of time that they have to exchange that same information and fill out one of those as well. So that's just kind of the initial overview or kind of summary of, hey, this is what I'm saying that I have, and them telling you what they have. Even if sometimes it matches because everybody knows what's going on in their house, sometimes it doesn't, and people
Sure.
will get that affidavit and be like, I didn't even know that he or she had this
Yeah,
account.
bingo.
So, but that's kind of the initial look into the finances.
That seems like a big deal to me, because what you're saying is at that early stage in the proceedings, you've got to fill out, each party must fill out truthfully all of their assets and all their liabilities, and they have to sign it, and that signature has to be notarized. That's a sworn declaration.
It is.
And to me, that seems like a pretty big deal, because we've heard of people who would, maybe unscrupulously hide money or hide assets or different things like that. Do you see that happening?
So there are some times where you don't get all of the information that you need, or the assets or the debts or the income that's listed on that initial affidavit. So there's another process as you're going through a divorce where you're able to conduct what's called discovery, and you send out questions, which are called interrogatories, and you send out a request for documents. And those are usually reciprocal, right? The husband will send it to the wife, or one spouse to the other, and vice versa. And then you have to, again, kind of in more detail than that affidavit that you initially filled out, you have to say, this is what I have, and also here's the documents that support that. So sometimes if you think that somebody might be hiding something, one of the things that you can do is you can go to their bank account. If they're making transfers to accounts that they haven't listed, then you can
Nice.
kind of try to follow the money, right?
Yeah.
Where did that transfer go? Or where did this deposit come from? You say you have this job, but here's a deposit that's coming in every month from someplace else. What is that? So the bank account can kind of give you quite
It's
a
good
wealth of
story.
information.
Creates a story.
Yeah.
I would think that cryptocurrency is kind of a difficult one to find. If somebody's using Coinbase, the app, or using some of these other apps, and the other spouse doesn't know, those are a little bit harder to, unless somebody's honest about it. Those are a little bit harder to find.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think are some red flags when you talk about hidden assets? What are some of the things that you look for?
Well, again, it's like if you're looking at that initial affidavit, and sometimes the spouse has an idea, maybe, right, of this is where they work, or one of the difficult things when you're talking about hiding assets or with income are people that have jobs where they're tipped. Right, so you have the servers,
Or paid under the table.
bartenders, or
Yeah.
people that do side jobs, and that money's it's paid in cash generally. It's not being accounted for. It's not showing up on a paycheck stub. So and a lot of those individuals that are receiving cash tips will just pocket the money. They're not depositing that into an account.
Of course
That's
not.
just their spending money.
Yeah.
So so when they go to report that, it's underreported a lot. So we see that in a lot of cases.
That's got to be tough.
It is.
Especially when you've got a client that says, I know they're working there.
Well,
Yeah.
not just the tip ones, Lauren. I know you've had some cases on both sides of this. The one side where we represented, and you can kind of go into detail about this, a spouse where she says, hey, I know he's got this business. He's got another business there. He's got a house in the suburbs, got the new wife, but nothing is in his name. It's like, it's in my brother's name, or is it in my uncle's name? And,
Yeah.
I'm just a manager here.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and again, I don't want to cut you off, but I know we've been on that side, but then we've also been on
Right.
the other
and
side.
It's difficult because when you are on both sides, because you'll consult with a client that says, yes, I'm making all of this money, but nothing is in my name.
Oh, God.
But you have the spouse that's saying, no, they own this business. This is their business. It's just in that person's name. It's like, you got to follow the paper trail. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, how much money are you actually bringing in? But you're right. They have all of these houses, or they're living in a house that maybe they've, whether or not they've been honest or dishonest with their spouse through the marriage or not,
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, if you look at the deed to the house and the deed is not in your or your husband's name, that is not an asset that's going to be divided generally.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if a spouse is if it's an 8-year marriage and she's used to living and having these expenses and thinking that we've got this beautiful home, I'm driving this Mercedes, I get an allowance, but at the end of the day, when they get a divorce, she's like, I know we've got money. There's $1 million in assets,
Yeah.
but if it's not in either one of them's name, is that considered a marital asset?
I mean, not unless you can trace it back to them. Not unless you can trace it back to one of them.
So we've been on the receiving end of that. What do you do? What do you tell a client?
Well, I mean, you can send out as many subpoenas to
Yeah.
try to get information to all the businesses, or see what their tax returns say, right? Does their tax returns indicate that they're have an ownership interest in anything? Have they held themselves out as an owner to anybody or on any documents? Have they signed as are they signing just as a representative or as a co-owner? So I think that those things could go toward it, but yeah, it's really difficult. You just have to kind of look at the fine details of those bank accounts and stuff like that, and see if there's anything there to try to pursue.
Wouldn't you be able to maybe call some witnesses into court and say, yeah, this is my boss, he owns this company, or anything like that? Do you ever need to do that?
So I think that you could, but do they own it, or are they
Yeah.
just the manager of it, right? Do they hold themselves out as the owner to employees, or have they made the employees believe that they're an owner? But they really have zero ownership interest in it. They're really just the manager, or the person that oversees the rest of the employees.
How does that impact spousal support and child support, where this family's been living on false pretenses? I mean, hiding assets for 8 years. They go on these vacations, but then legally, when there's a separation and the spouse is saying, "Well, Your Honor, I want spousal support because I'm used to living this way, and we've got 3 children, and we need this amount of child support."
Yeah.
How does the court treat child and spouse support?
Well, it comes down to what's the court going to place these parties' incomes at?
Yeah.
And are we going to use what was on their tax return? Are we going to use what was deposited in their bank accounts? Are we going to, use an average over the last few years? You can in a case, you can pay to have an expert come and do an evaluation of a spouse to say, hey, based on their history and their education and work history and stuff like that, what are they able to make? So an argument can be made that, hey, they're on paper, they're saying that they can only make X amount, but we think they can make significantly higher.
Yeah. What's
and
that
then-
called?
That's called, you get a vocational expert. It's a vocational evaluation that's done. But, I mean, again, in these divorces, sometimes when people come in, they just don't have a bunch of money that they can just throw away at all of these extra evaluations. So it ends up getting pricey. So then they're like, well, do I want to pay for the evaluation to be done, or would I rather pocket that money or keep it for something that might be more useful? So sometimes they're looking at the short game versus the long game, but can't help it.
I mentioned earlier why I thought that that the affidavit is a big deal as being a sworn statement. And I think what we've seen here, and what you've seen a lot of, is you've got these folks who are in relationships where nobody really knows sometimes where the other person's making money. I mean, it's a completely different commentary about what kind of marriage that might have been. But my first question is, have you been in situations before where you look at the affidavit of financial disclosure and then later on you realize this person has not disclosed everything? Mm-hmm. Have you had that situation before?
Sure. Yep.
And is there a penalty associated with it? How do the courts treat it? Is it more like, oh, it's just an oversight, or it's not that big of a deal? Because I see it as a big deal.
Yeah, so in practice, usually what will happen is once an asset is uncovered that it wasn't disclosed on an affidavit, you just kind of keep the process moving versus halting it or saying, hey, I want to I want to spend more money to file a motion about this specific thing that might not result in anything,
Like a
right?
contempt, like
right.
asking them to file a contempt.
Correct, or saying, hey, they violated some sort of rule or order, they didn't disclose everything. A lot of times what you hear, if there is something that was omitted from one of those affidavits, is that, it was a mistake, or they forgot.
Okay.
So then they try to rectify it that way. What I try to do is I try to get people through this process as quickly as I can, and I don't try to just linger and use up their own assets. They have other places they can spend that on.
It's the old saying, throwing good money to find the bad money.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
And you're right. Ultimately, you got folks with limited assets, and boy, if you've got somebody crafty enough, that's going to be difficult, isn't it?
It is. Yep.
So I think, as they say, money comes, easy money goes. Money comes, money goes. I think the harder part about these cases is when you have children, right? And somebody can lose $100,000, but then they can get lucky and win that, or get a job that gets them back that salary, and then people get back on their feet. They may have to start from ground zero again. But financially, I think it's reasonable to say that there are ways to get back on your feet financially, whether it's from a divorce or a bankruptcy, or you have some sort of financial loss in your life. But the one thing that people can't get back is the loss of time, with their children, and talking about custody wars and how emotional that is. And, children remain forever as money is equally divided. And, looking back at some of the cases have you done, kind of tell us about the parents kind of weaponizing their children against each other.
Yeah. Well, and also just to tie the finances into the child and parenting time stuff, is that people sometimes forget that when they're going through a divorce, that you're going from a two-spouse household to dividing that up, right? So whether or not that's, hey, we had two incomes coming into this house and we lived pretty comfortably, to now we're having to do two households, and now things are a bit tighter, right? And they don't understand why, and it's difficult sometimes to wrap their mind around that. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to kids, that, hey, I'm used to my kids being in this house with us as parents all the time, and now I'm having to divide that time up, and that doesn't feel good.
No. That's a good way of putting it. It doesn't feel good.
It doesn't. But it's also, sometimes what you see also is that bad behavior that may have been in place in a two-parent household, that was not called to light or not brought to the forefront. Now that there's a divorce going on or the parties are separated, now it's become a large issue, right?
Bad behavior of the child.
No, I'm talking about between the parents.
Oh, okay.
So, for instance, let's say one of the parents smokes weed or whatever, okay? And they've smoked weed, and they do it every day or whatever.
Yeah.
It was never an issue when
Right.
when we were married and we were
Now
living
it is.
together.
Now,
Yeah.
But now that we're getting divorced, now it's like
He's a drug
he's
user.
a drug addict.
Yeah, but you
Right?
let me be the
right.
drug addict.
You
when
didn't
I was-
have a problem with that
Right.
when you guys were together,
That's a
but
good
now
point.
you
That's a
want to
very good
use
point.
it.
That's a very good point.
So those sort of things you see a lot, is that the behavior was acceptable when we were together, but now that we're separating, now I have an issue
Whether
with
it's
it.
drugs or alcohol, whether
Yeah.
we go out every weekend, and we've been doing this for 10 years, and I do a bowling league every Friday, and I'm going to drink at least 6 or 7 beers, and all of a sudden that wasn't an issue, but now
Yeah.
you're doing the same thing after we separated, and you're harming our children.
And I think it also is that one parent is scared because they are used to, and going back to kind of not necessarily the stay-at-home parent, but you just generally have certain rules within your house, right? Like one spouse does one thing, one does another. And And with like rearing the children, sometimes it's not always 50-50, right? It can be 80-20 sometimes. And I think that when you're separating, you have that parent that maybe has been doing 80% of the work, and now they're scared because they're like, I don't know that the other parent can handle it
Oh, that's a good
because I've
point.
done it all. I've done it all, and I don't think that they're going to know what to do. So you see that too a lot.
The custody issues, and I'll tell you what I've said to people my entire legal career. If I'm doing criminal defense work and someone comes to me and says, hey, by the way, I've robbed a bank, I'm looking at 12 years in prison. Mm-hmm. I said, boy, that's a pretty big thing. That's weight on my shoulders as a defense attorney. I've got to try to help this person.
Yeah.
I think, and not just think, I believe that even more responsibility is someone like you who's doing a custody case, and instead of the adult having to go do 12 years in a prison, I'm exaggerating here, but you're talking about your efforts, and in a custody case, is not the adult, but where those children who might be 2, 3, 4, 5 during the course of a divorce are now going to spend the next 12 to 15 years, who are they going to be with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's one thing for the person who committed the bank robbery to say, okay, well, I'll go do my time. But this person now the kids are there. And if it's a bad situation, right? To me, custody is bigger than almost, I can't think of an issue that custody is that's bigger than custody.
Right. I think that, and custody is one of those things that it's difficult to get people, if they don't start off in an arrangement where they're able to have a good co-parent relationship, or they're able to effectively communicate with each other, they're not trying to hold one parent from the kids or whatnot. It's those other situations that tend to not have agreements, or people don't want to agree, or they want to argue. It ends up going to a trial and stuff like that. So I try to remind people that trying to work together with the spouse to come up with an arrangement that's best for your kids is going to be best overall, and mainly for your children. But you go to trial on some of these custody cases, then you're in essence saying to the court or saying to the judge, hey, I know you don't know me, and I know you don't know my kids, but you tell me how often I get to see them.
I couldn't imagine that.
And it's like putting that sort of responsibility into a stranger's hands.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I would want to risk that. I would want to say in how often I get to see my kids, even if it's not completely what I want.
Sure. And nobody's ever, especially when it's a contested dispute, nobody's ever happy.
In divorces, just in general, nobody ever leaves happy. It's just and it's funny because a lot of people in the judicial system that deal with divorces will say that, you know, if both parties leave unhappy, then it's then it's fair. It's a fair deal, probably.
Yeah, and I know, kind of a side topic for this, but how have you seen, in your experience in doing these custody cases, how have you seen this process impact the children?
You know, I just had a conversation today that the kids, I think, feel like they're pulled in two different directions.
Yeah.
Kids generally don't want to hurt the feelings of either parent. So a lot of times what you hear is, you know, that the kid kind of wavers, right? Because they'll tell their parent, their mom or their dad or whomever, that they'll tell them what they want to hear. And then they go to the other parent's house and tell them what they want to hear, because they're just caught in the middle.
Yeah.
They're caught in the middle.
You take a case, someone comes in to see you and they say, Lauren, I've got a divorce, I need a divorce. I've got a couple of kids. I need you to help me through this process. And my goal right now is I need to do as well as I can financially, and I need custody of these kids. And so your job is the advocate for that individual. The other spouse is going to get a lawyer that's going to try to do the same thing. Explain the process that a court might employ when trying to determine who might be a better fit for the kids? I'm talking about guardian ad litem.
So a guardian ad litem are licensed attorneys, and they take special training, special classes, and then they get put on a list through the court system, and they're called guardian ad litems. And what they do is they're appointed by the court in custody cases sometimes, and their job is to conduct interviews of parents and people that have involvement with kids, whether it's extended family or child care providers, counselors, whomever. So they conduct those interviews, they investigate, they do home visits, they see the kids with each parent. They can go to the kids' school and talk to them separately if necessary. But what the end goal is that this guardian ad litem will do their investigation. They will put their investigation into written words. They'll issue a report, and at the end of that report, they give a recommendation. And that recommendation says to the court, hey, this is what I recommend in this case for this family, for these kids. Who should have custody, or what should the custody situation be, and what should the parenting time be? Now, that document, although is just a recommendation, the court does not have to follow it. The court can do whatever they want to do with a decision. But I mean, if a guardian ad litem is appointed by a judge, that judge is going to rely heavily on what that report and recommendation
Because
says.
it's supposed to be speaking for the child or children, right?
It's neutral, right?
Yeah.
I can't go to the other spouse's house and knock on the door and say, "Hey, let me in and let me see what's going on in there."
Yeah.
Lauren,
You know?
you were once, correct me if I'm wrong, you were once a GAL?
I was a guardian ad litem for a number of years, and I was a guardian on primarily cases involving children's services. So I would be appointed by the court to go out and investigate when children's services was involved.
That puts a lot of pressure on the GAL to get it right.
Yeah.
I mean, if the judge heavily relies on it, the lawyers know that the judge relies on it, so that's going to help tug and pull one way or the other during the settlement. At least you can kind of gauge, with your client whether it's favorable or not, and you kind of negotiate through that. But
Yeah.
what if they get it wrong? I mean, are there circumstances where you got it wrong, or a GAL gets it wrong, and you're like, man, I don't agree with it.
Well, and sometimes, we're advocating for a certain side, right? So sometimes when we get a report that's not favorable to our client or not what our client wants,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they got it wrong just because we don't like it, right? It might be what's best for the kids, but we have a position that we're advocating for. But yeah, there have been times where the guardian has gotten it wrong, and there have been times where you end up having to still go to trial, and the judge will side with you and
Yeah.
side against what the guardian says. Does it happen often? No, but it does happen. So, I mean, the guardians are like anybody else. They're human. They do make mistakes. But the thing is that you want to make sure that that guardian has everybody that's important for them to talk to, that they've talked to them, that any sort of documents that might support your position, why they should recommend for your client, you want to make sure that they have those. As long as they have all of the information, you're hoping that at the end of the day, they're going to come out to the recommendation that you hope for your client.
From your experience, what is the one factor that you think a court would look at that sways a case one way or the other? Whether it's a factor of mental abuse or physical abuse, what is one factor that you've seen that always sways the court to the other direction?
I mean, I think that obviously, physical abuse would be
Of course.
a huge one. You're seeing more of the mental abuse and of the alienation of children coming into play. But again, to prove alienation, right? You're generally
Define that.
Well, I mean, it's just a one parent trying to make efforts to not encourage and foster a loving and positive relationship with the other parent.
Yeah.
But
Which I believe has to happen a lot of times on these cases because they're so emotional.
And I think that the court can, they can allude to the fact that they believe that there might be alienation out there, but, without an expert coming and saying, yes, this is definite alienation. But, sometimes you get stuff out with counseling. If a child has an individual counselor that they see, they share stuff with that counselor, and sometimes you can get information out that way. But
Can children say, this is who I want to live with? Can they force a court to do that?
So the state of Ohio has a list of best interest factors that the court looks at when determining what's in the best interest of a child, what they're planning on doing. And one of those best interests, there's multiple, but one of the best interest factors is what are the wishes of the child? What's the child desire? There's been some talk that oh, well, once my child turns 14, then they can get to decide who they want to live with. And I think that it's all, I think that the child's wishes always come into play if they're old enough to be able to say what their wishes would be. But it's not definite. Just because, a 6-year-old says, I want to live with my mom, doesn't mean that they're going to live with their mom.
Yeah.
I mean, and you have to look at the maturity level of a child. You have to look at what their age is. Obviously a 16-year-old is going to have more say in what a parenting time schedule looks like than a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So it does come into play, but it's not definite.
I would think the age of the child, though, the older the child, may be more likely. You got a kid who's 16, 17. You know what? I want to live with Dad. Dad's close to the school. I can finish up school. I can go get the job. I'm working down the street. It's more convenient for me to do that. Mom's too far. Things like that. It seems like the older they are, the more likely a court.
I think that also as a child gets older into their teenage, 15, 16, 17, they become more independent, right? They don't want to spend all of their time at home with their parents. They have friends and they have activities and they have jobs and they start driving. You're lucky if they're at home at all. So it does come into play more when they're older.
I'm going to ask Tony this.
Okay.
But I want you to listen to the question. I wonder if you've heard of this. Have you ever heard of a nesting house?
A nesting house.
Have you heard of a
No.
nesting house?
No.
I think it's called a nesting house.
What is it?
It's a. This is what I understand. So think for a moment that not all custody cases are going to go horribly wrong. Okay, parties may say we're going to get along. We're going to be 50% with mom, 50% with dad. All going to be great. I think it's called a nesting house, where the parties have a house and the kids live in the house.
Okay.
And 1 week, mom goes and lives in the house. She's got a room. And then the next week, dad comes and lives in the house. And the idea is that the kids, their world doesn't change at all. It's just the parents.
Sounds very
Have you
progressive.
heard of this?
Sounds very progressive.
So I have heard of one case actually recently, not on a permanent order, but on a temporary basis, that the kids remained in the house and each spouse came and went on a week
Yeah.
basis.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, and it would be like, because you mentioned it earlier, you go from a two spouse, maybe two income spouse, to one home where you're just paying, one rent, one mortgage, one grocery bill, one electric bill, to two spouses, two homes. So it's not going to be as much. And in this situation, the kids are like, hey, this is the home that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And so they keep that home, and then the husband and wife get an apartment somewhere. I don't know. I thought that, and this is something that I had heard about years ago, but I guess it just doesn't take off. I guess most people don't.
Yeah.
They're more like, I'm moving on. I'm going to go get my own.
And would it be one apartment so that they would each switch off on the apartment?
That's a great idea.
This is
Seems like now you're paying for 3 households just to try this nesting house.
I think it's a great idea. Not that I want to participate.
No,
in it.
no,
I'm
but
just
it-
saying, like,
But
it
we're
could make
talking about
sense.
best interest of kids,
Yeah.
right?
Sure,
And
yeah.
isn't the best interest of the kids? Hey, wait, Mom and Dad are getting divorced. What's that
Well-
mean? We move on? No, we're staying right. You guys are staying right here. We're coming and going.
Right. Nothing happens with you. Everything
Well,
stays the same for you.
And you always hear situations and friends and neighbors and my kids' friends and what have you, that their friends are saying, well, yeah, my friend is at mom's house this week, and then next week dad's, and I won't see friend this week because he's just the tug and pull of that. I just couldn't imagine, and I know how difficult that is, for the children, and it's got to be difficult for the parents. The overall tough situation, but nesting and keeping a child in one place without having them change their lives. The parents have changed their lives. The parents are moving on. It's the children that are trying to figure that out at such a young age.
Yeah, and I think that you also see just with people that I know who are divorced or have children that go back and forth, and the children adapt pretty well, but it works a heck of a lot better and easier when the parents get along, and just have that added stress if they don't get along is difficult.
So Lauren, go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, I was going to ask. So how different are these situations when marriage is not involved? Like if the parents never got married, does that change things much? Or
Brandon, I believe you're talking about baby mama drama.
baby
Which
mama
is-
drama,
you're
which is
getting
what I
that.
thought this episode was going to be called. So.
Thank you, Brandon, for bringing that up. But that's a good question.
Baby mama.
Baby
drama.
mama drama segment.
Yeah. So and that happens. So if
But
there's,
does that change like the way the court rules on these, or what are the issues in play there?
So in the state of Ohio right now, if a child is born to a mother who is not married, is not married to the father of that child, then under Ohio law, the mother has custody of that child right out of the gate.
Even if the dad signs the birth certificate.
Even if the dad signs a birth certificate, the mom has custody under law. And in order for dad to be able to get any sort of rights established for that child, he has to go to court and ask for that to happen. So there are many, many, many situations where you have a mother who has had a child. Dad either did or didn't sign the birth certificate, and then it's a process, right, to go through the court, find an attorney, file the stuff, get into court for a hearing, and you could go months before that dad's able to see his kid at all.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Mom automatically has custody.
Mm-hmm.
Dad has zero parental rights. He signs the birth certificate, but by law, he's obligated to immediately pay child support. Is that true or false?
That's false.
Okay.
Yeah, the mom would have to request the child support through the child support agency. Generally, is how that works.
But would dad automatically start getting some parental rights before, as he's paying child support, or that's a separate?
It's a separate issue. So just because, there's a misconception that if I pay child support and therefore I get parenting time, those are two separate things, and they don't. Now, sometimes they can be litigated together, right? So it seems like, my child support order starts and I'm getting parenting time, but that is not a definite. And the mom can go and ask for child support, and that does not automatically mean that dad gets rights.
That's such an interesting thing, because I think it's a big misconception that I've seen. And of course, I don't do this work anymore, but I remember these situations where people would call and they'd say, well, had the baby, I went to court, I'm paying child support now. I said, well, you got served with paperwork. Yeah. And then you went to court. Yeah. And you said, this is my child. And they said, yeah. And then what? And they said, now I'm paying child support, but I still don't get to see my kid, because nobody ever tells them, hey, this would have been a good time to file your own document to get parenting time.
Yeah.
And there's nobody there at the door of the juvenile court to say, hey, don't forget to do this.
And I don't think that, that you don't have the hospital staff, even if the dads are fortunate enough to be able to be there for the birth of their child, or they're given notice when their child is born. There's nobody there that says, hey, by the way, you're at the mercy of mom right now. So it comes as a blow to a lot of fathers that are in that situation that they don't automatically have some sort of rights to their children.
So let's go through this. Who's the daddy segment? Who's the daddy? He signs the birth certificate,
Okay.
right? Legally, is he considered the dad?
He is. He is the legal father of that child.
Now, when he files for some sort of parental rights, do they have to still go through paternity testing?
So if a father is on the birth certificate at the time that he files to establish his rights, then that serves as the requirement
Okay.
so that you don't have to get the genetic testing. There's also, let's say, the instance where dad doesn't sign the birth certificate and he files and
Right.
both parties agree. Mom will agree, hey, that is my child's father. Well, then they might be able to bypass that genetic testing as well.
What if someone were to come to you and say, should I just sign the birth certificate or should I do the genetic testing? What advice are you giving them?
Well, I mean, my first question would be, do you think that there's the possibility that
Yeah.
you're not the father?
Yeah.
Because once you sign that birth certificate, you have accepted legal responsibility for that
Oh, boy.
child.
Forever.
Right, right. And the only way...
Wait a minute, forever? Like, there's no way to challenge paternity?
So you can, but if
You
you...
go on Maury Povich.
Right? Who's the daddy?
But if you're filing to say, hey, I want to disestablish,
Yeah.
Oh,
you
boy.
better have somebody there. You better have another man there that is willing to take that test.
We have TV shows for that, Lauren.
But somebody says,
Right.
you know what? I'm signing the birth certificate, and okay, guess what? You're going to get custody, or not custody, but maybe you have parenting time. Or let's just say you got a couple of folks that aren't married, they have a child, they love each other, they're living with each other. They go through and they say, okay, I'm just going to sign the birth certificate. And then 6 years, 7 years later, this guy might be saying, yeah, this is my daughter.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, they later on do a paternity. He has a doubt. He does a paternity test and he finds out, not my daughter. But the court has already established through me signing the birth certificate, I've been paying support, I've been doing things, I've been acting as this child's father.
That's
Are they
not
able to get out of it?
I don't believe that there's any avenue. I don't
Right.
believe that there's any avenue for you to get out of that. I mean, like I said at the beginning stages, if you have another guy that's willing to step up and take a
Yeah.
test and accept that responsibility, then you might be able to. But if you already have a court that's issued orders, and then years down the road, I mean, you sign that paper accepting responsibility.
So isn't it then, the question isn't, are you sure it's not? Isn't it just easy enough? Let's just go do the genetic test. Just
have
do it.
Paternity
Yeah.
testing.
Right.
The thing is, though, is that like, let's say that the dad doesn't sign the birth certificate at the time that the baby's born, and then he files to establish his rights in court, and the mom won't agree that he's the father, or he wants to get that genetic testing done just to make sure. It does delay the process, right? Because you have one hearing that says, okay, well, before we get to your parenting time, before we get to determine whether or not you get to see your kid, we need to determine whether or not you're the dad. So let's take the test, and then we'll come back for another hearing to see if you're the dad, and then we'll set a hearing to see if you can have parenting time. So now you're 4 or 5 months down the road sometimes.
Yeah, but that seems like such a stupid bureaucratic issue for something that important. It ought to just be, I know that many courts have like a standing order. You file a divorce. Hey, by the way, nobody can mess with you can't buy or sell any of the assets, right?
Right.
They just issue it. Why can't they just simply say, okay, go get your finger pricked, go do whatever, get the genetic test, let's get it done.
Yeah.
Why can't,
Yeah, they
that
just
seems like that makes so much sense.
have not developed that yet. So, I mean...
I think we've kind of talked about this. Paying child support doesn't equate to automatically getting parenting time. What causes more disputes? And again, we talk about issues of child custody related issues of parties that were non-married. Those issues are dealt with in juvenile court. So
Correct.
kind of in a generality, divorce cases or civil cases, they're dealt with in
Domestic relations.
domestic relations court. Juvenile cases that are parties were never married but involve children and child support are dealt with in juvenile court. And the matters in response in regard to the child.
Correct.
So what causes, in your experience in doing this for 15 years, what causes more disputes, more fights, issues that parties dispute of money, child support amounts, or issues that involve parenting time?
Yeah.
What do you see more of?
I mean, I see, you know, I think that the problem is that people aren't always honest if it is just about the money, if it is just about the child support.
But it really is, though.
So they'll,
Right.
or they will say, I want more time with my children, but really what they want is to not pay as much in child support.
Okay.
So I see both, but I also, on the flip side of that, like let's say that mom has custody, and dad will just say, I want as much time as I can with my kid. I don't care what I have to pay. I just want as much time as I can.
Yeah.
So you see that as well, where money doesn't come into play. But you do see it quite a bit where it's like, well, I want more time with my kids, but then that would also result in less child support.
That's what I wanted to hear. That's the kicker, right? So again, this sounds terrible,
Yeah.
but the more time that a parent gets, whether it's equal parenting time or shared parenting time, that equates to a lower amount of child support. So you do see that where the motivation, whether you're on the receiving end or on the challenging end, sometimes the motivation, although whether they want to admit it or not, is a reduction
Yeah.
of
Well,
child support.
It is. And let me just make the distinction because a lot of people don't know that in Ohio, the two types of custody that people can hold is either one parent having legal custody and the other parent being the non-custodial parent.
Okay, what does that mean?
So that just means that whoever has legal custody has the ability to make the decisions for the child.
Like what kind of
okay?
medicine he gets when he's sick?
Or, medical procedures, or where's the kid going to go to school? So there are plenty of cases where one parent has custody, the other parent doesn't, but they're still, let's say, an equal. They've decided on a 50-50 parenting time schedule, right? So that is possible.
That's interesting.
And then the other and there's also times where one parent has custody, the other doesn't, and one parent just has the every other weekend. So the parenting time schedule can fluctuate. Same with a shared parenting arrangement. People have a misconception that shared parenting means equal time and no child support.
Oh boy.
And all shared parenting means is both parents have custody.
Legal custody.
Legal
so they
custody.
can both make decisions.
Correct. They work together to make decisions on the
Okay.
major issues regarding your child. Day-to-day decisions will be made by whatever parent the child's with.
They don't
But-
have to call the other parent for permission to take the kid to a specific doctor.
Well, yes, they do. So for medical stuff, you would want to consult with the other parent. For educational stuff, you would want to make sure that the other parent.
Even on a shared parenting plan.
On a shared parenting plan. When I say day-to-day decisions, I'm saying,
We're
hey,
to have lunch.
Can Susie go to a sleepover at her friend's house?
Okay.
Right? It's like if it's my parenting time, I'm gonna make that decision.
Susie's an arbitrary name that you just.
Susie is an arbitrary name.
Okay, gotcha. I didn't know if that was like.
So,
There's no real.
but people believe sometimes that, oh, well, I want shared parenting, that's equal time, and that's not
Okay.
necessarily the case.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Lauren, I want to ask you, you got two people, they have a child together, they love each other, they live with each other, and they might be hesitant to establish paternity.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, this is his father. We're living together, right? But if we go, we don't need to waste money. We don't need to go to court. We don't need to establish paternity. Once we do that, there's going to be child support. It's going to be problems.
Yeah.
We don't need to do that. Good idea, bad idea.
So I think that I think that it's generally a bad idea, but I think that probably because I always see the fallout when it doesn't work,
Yeah.
right? So there's plenty of times where you have parents that are in these relationships, they don't have a paternity test, they're not married, and everything's going swimmingly for 10 years.
Until it doesn't.
Until it doesn't. And then the dad is calling me saying, I don't have any rights to my kid.
Yeah.
I've been in my kid's life every single day for 10 years.
Terrible.
So now they're in the same position that poor father who just had a baby, who's deciding whether or not to put his name on the birth certificate, he's in that same position, but now 10 years later. So, I mean, I've had conversations with people sometimes that I just say, maybe you could just convince the other person to just say, hey, let's just go to court and just put something in writing just in case,
Yeah.
But the thing is that people don't want to have those awkward conversations. They don't want to have that confrontation with the other parent because they don't want it to fall apart.
Yeah.
And maybe they just don't want to believe really that they're in the position or could be in that position at some point in time down the road.
See, when I look at that issue, I look at it from a different perspective. I look at it from the perspective of the child. And the way that I look at it from the perspective of a child is you got two people, they love each other, they love me, they're
Yeah.
living together. Oh, big deal. He's my dad, right? That's my dad. It's always been my dad.
Sure.
In that regard, that seems to be like, okay, well, that's the child's happy. But what the child doesn't know is as life moves on, and now we're 10 years, maybe 12 years, maybe 15, maybe now the child is an adult.
Well, don't go past 18.
Well, what I'm
don't
saying
go past
is
18 because we're going to lose jurisdiction. In
well,
juvenile court.
what I'm going to say is that say now dad's working for a company, he's got he's got a beneficiary policy for life insurance, or now
Yeah.
the child needs to say, well, that's my father's. It was never been established. You're not entitled to that.
Or health insurance,
Or
right?
health
Yeah.
insurance.
That's a big one.
And so by we're living together, everything's great. But I've always looked at it as saying I think that you're shortchanging this child. How? I'm not sure, but into the future it can only be helpful. It can only be helpful if that child there's an established father.
Yeah.
That's just the way I've always looked at that. And I know a lot of people who are smart, intelligent people, and they just don't think it's that big of a deal. I think I disagree with it.
Yeah.
Lauren, have you seen on these cases where, you're right there.
Sorry.
Lauren's just getting so excited about this podcast.
Sorry.
Take a hit of that H2O. It is water for our audience. Tell us if what you've seen in situations, in whether it's post degree custodial issues or juvenile case issues, where a child is introduced to the new boyfriend or the new girlfriend. Do you get calls from the client going,
Well, usually the parent, excuse me, usually the parent has already researched that other significant other. They already know about their social media account. They know about their criminal history and everything.
Take
So-
another hit.
I know, I'm sorry. But usually if we get a call from a parent that has a concern about a significant other, it's because either an event has happened or they've looked up something and found something out about
So
them.
what would get, so it obviously everybody's so emotional, right?
Sure.
The other person's moved on, they got a new boyfriend. Now my kid is playing catch with them,
Yeah.
Calling him daddy.
calling him daddy.
Yeah.
Can a judge stop an overnight visit, like if there's a guest that the other party doesn't really approve of? Like I know, there's the child's going to see dad or mom, and we know the special guest is going to be there because he's going to make pizzas in the backyard. Can you petition the court without knowing anything negative about that guest?
I don't. You're going to have some information to warrant a court saying I'm going to come into this parenting time schedule, or I'm going to interfere with it and disrupt it.
Okay.
Just because you don't like a boyfriend or girlfriend.
Tell me what if you've experienced in your legal practice, not personal, of course, but in the legal practice, what besides a criminal record? And again, I don't, and Nick and I do, we do criminal defense, and we always feel like everybody gets a bad day. Everybody gets 2 bad days, but that doesn't make them a bad person. We represent a lot of terrific human beings that have bad days. So to me, I'm discounting unless somebody's charged with, a heinous crime. Right, a violent offense or a sexual assault of some sort. Setting that aside, I don't look at a criminal record as something that shows somebody's character of not caring for a child and being a good person and being a good human being. So criminal record aside, what else?
Right. Well, and let me be clear that I'm not saying that the criminal record rises to the level of interfering with a parent's parenting time with their child. It's just sometimes people will bring that to you and say, hey, 15 years ago, they had an OVI.
Oh, my God.
So as like a basis for trying to pull those kids out of that home. If there's drugs, if there's current drug use with a significant other, I think that would be an indicator there that the court might get involved, as well as obviously abuse. If the significant other has them in unsafe situations. But, the court also will look at the parent who has the child in their home and say, well, I'm trusting that they're going to make a good judgment call. They're not going to leave their kids with just some, Tom, Dick, or Harry.
Have you had any cases, well, I'm sure you have. You've had a lot of cases, but any cases where you're asked to defend that? You're asking to defend the spouse that is bringing the boyfriend around, and the other party's saying, I don't want my child to be around your boyfriend.
Yeah, I do. I've had a case where the mother's boyfriend and actually I think they may have been married. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the husband, I think they were, the husband's prior criminal record was trying to be brought in. Look how bad of a person he is from 10 years ago. Like, he shouldn't be around our kids. And I'm like, it's 10 years old. And same that you said, you have a bad day. You can have 1 bad day. You can have 2 bad days or whatever. You also have to look at what is the charge, right? Are they getting charged with crimes against children? Then you have a problem.
Sure.
But I think that if it's just, okay, well, they picked up a theft charge 10 years ago, it's not going to affect what the parenting time is going to be for their spouse or significant other. I don't think.
So, okay, you got custody. Custody has been established. The parties have been living under maybe a parenting agreement for a couple of years. What happens when someone says, you know what, I'm getting out of town, I'm leaving, and I'm going to move out of town, and I'm taking the kids with me?
Taking Susie with him.
So
Yes, Susie. She's everywhere.
So
Get a little closer to that mic, Lauren.
if there is a custody agreement that's already in place, then usually there's a provision in there, and I believe that it's also statutory in Ohio, that says that, hey, if you're planning on relocating with a child, you have to petition the court, and you either need to file an agreement with the court to say, hey, this is what the new arrangement's going to be, or you have to petition the court and say, hey, am I allowed to move? Can I move with this child? Now, if you're moving to another county and it's not going to disrupt what the current custodial or parenting time arrangement is, then you don't have to ask for that permission.
Yeah.
But if you're moving from Ohio to Tennessee or wherever, moving states, and your goal is to take that child with you, you have to petition the court. And then the court has to make a decision as to whether or not that child's leaving. The court will let you, as a parent, go wherever you want. You don't have that restriction.
Right.
You want to move to Tennessee, you move to Tennessee. The question becomes, are you allowed to take that kid with you? And is the reason for your move legitimate enough to convince us that
Yeah.
you should be able to take that kid
So
with you?
two options. Number one, I've got this great job. I'm going to be making double. We're moving into a great community. The school district there is so much better. Sounds like a good opportunity. might be granted.
It's an argument. It's definitely a viable argument that you can make.
Or option B, I'm quitting my job. I've got no form of employment. I just met a guy last weekend in Cabo San Lucas, and I'm moving 2 states away. Probably not going to take the kid with you.
Probably not happening. You're
Yeah.
probably not going to convince a court to allow that to happen.
But let me ask you this: the moving parent. Let's say all that happens. The moving parent to the court. Does the court make the non-moving parent travel,
Right.
or what happens?
More
where-
issues.
More issues. Like who?
Well, and then you have to decide, what does that parenting time schedule look like, right? If someone's just moving over to Indiana and they could maybe do every other weekend, then maybe
Stays the same.
right? Or maybe it doesn't change that much, right? Maybe you don't. But if you're moving to California, well, then the court has to say, okay, well, when does that non-custodial parent, when do they get to see their kid? Well, generally the majority of the summer, maybe the holidays, extended school breaks. But it's really difficult on that parent that's kind of left behind. And as far as transportation goes, a lot of courts will say, hey, you want to move? You're paying to transport that kid to and from this parenting time. Mm-hmm. So they won't put the aggrieved parent, in essence, in a position to have to shoulder half of those costs.
That's an interesting point. And it sounds like it comes down to equity. Right? Mm-hmm. What is equity? What's fair in a lot of these cases?
Sure.
Even though you're talking about a child is not a property, which is
I know.
insane in how the courts kind of look at it.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we see now, especially with social media, you got child or children influencers that are controlled by parent. At some point, you've got parents posting content that you get 1 or 2 videos that could go viral, and all of a sudden this child becomes an influencer, and we see a lot of it. What happens when parenting ends and privacy begins, and can the other party? Again, this is a nuance, and you may have not had cases about this, but I think it's an interesting phenomenon when you got parties and you talk about whether they have legal custody or whether they have shared parenting, but the one parent opens up a social media account for fun, posts a video that goes viral, and all of a sudden you've got, 1 million followers.
Or attention, or unwanted attention.
Unwanted attention.
And I think it might also be jurisdiction. There was a woman that not that I know, but that I viewed her videos on TikTok, and she would have her children, her children's faces on there or whatever. She made many videos, and then all of a sudden her children's faces started being like covered up with emojis, or like she wouldn't show their faces, right? Or she would only show like the backs of them or whatever. And I don't know if it's true or not, but it would make sense that the children's father, who's not with that mother, made an issue about it and said, I don't want my kids' faces to be out there online. And I don't know what state they live in. I have not myself come up with that issue, but I have had cases where one parent wants control over the children's online presence. So we've actually had, a divorce decree that had one parent that had the authority to determine what sort of content went online about their children. But then you come up with the issue that, hey, on my private Instagram account, if mom has the authority over their online presence, does that mean I'm not even allowed to post a picture of me and my child at a family event on my private Instagram?
That's a good point. What do you do?
Right.
What do they do?
I mean, it's up to the court, I guess, to decide. I mean, as far as mom's position is, hey, I have full access and authority over their online presence, and your Instagram account is online, and I say no.
Lauren, it's one thing, and there's 2 ways to kind of look at it. It's insane to think about the fact that courts are deciding issues of separation between 2 individuals, and then child-related issues, and you got issues with social media and child support. but also it's comforting to know that we have the courts to do that, because if you didn't, these
Right.
people's lives would be ruined in the sense that they could never agree on anything. They
Right.
just needed some mediator to help them move on. And that's kind of what we do as lawyers, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're doing, what you do every day when you talk to these individuals. I mean, what sort of advice, what is the biggest advice that you would give individuals who are thinking about, things haven't been working out and they're thinking about getting a divorce? What are some of the things advice that you give them before even walking into a lawyer's office?
I think that knowing as much as you can about your finances is key, right? I mean, it makes it a little bit more difficult nowadays with people receiving bills or statements online or through email. They're not coming through the mailbox anymore. But I think that if people can kind of get a handle on what are our finances? Where do we at least have accounts? What sort of credit cards do we have? And just jotting it down, just to have just kind of a little bit of a map of maybe where you could go, or the information that maybe we could subpoena to try to look for that to make it a little bit easier. So I think that would be helpful information to have if you're trying to get out of a situation. I think also, I mean, it's difficult because when you have kids and you're going to go through a divorce, a lot of times that relationship with your spouse is toxic, and just trying, and it's difficult because, as bad as one parent might want to effectively communicate or try to communicate with the other parent, it's just not happening. So I think just trying to keep your kids in a position where they don't have to endure that fallout is helpful too. And sometimes that might mean that you have to leave just to make it a less toxic situation for them.
That's difficult.
Yeah.
It's a tough choice.
Yeah.
Question for you. You've done this for a long time. I want you to be a little critical, or maybe a little bit introspective with this. What are courts not doing that they should do as it relates to some of these issues? What would you like to see changed?
So in some respects, I would like to see the norm for some of these cases, for divorces that involve children, that the norm be shared parenting right out of the gate, right? So that you don't have one parent that's just trying to get a leg up because the kids have been with them for longer or something like that, or if they've done more responsibilities, so now they're the primary parent. So I think that if courts started at shared parenting for everybody, and then you can go from there. It doesn't mean that shared parenting has to work, but at least let that be the neutral, right? Let's let that be the baseline.
So you're saying start off with that and then deviate if there are other factors that would warrant deviation. And the courts don't start at that, right?
They don't. I mean, what they're looking at a lot of times, and going back to that unwed mother where the dad doesn't have any rights, you're 4 months down the road and the court's saying, okay, well, who should have custody of this kid, right? Because at that point in time, the court can determine, does mom or dad get custody? Mom has custody by law, but the court gets to determine who ultimately gets custody. But if you're 4 months down the road and that kid, that 4-month-old's been with mom every single day, 24/7, then the chances of that court pulling that kid from mom is slim.
Has this approach been influenced over the years and years ago by kind of traditional gender roles?
Of course.
Mom, the caregiver, custody. That's where we've been, right? And
Correct.
you think we've progressed, or you don't see that as a reason why it just ought to be an automatic default?
So I think that you're absolutely right. And going back, 40 or 50 years, I think that the mother is generally been the one that's been staying home with the kids. She's the one that's rearing them. Should she be the primary parent to care for them? People will still call me and say, well, Ohio is a mother state, so I don't, I know that the mom's going to get custody.
Yeah.
So I think that the court is moving more toward hey, let's start out at shared parenting and see if that works before we just give all of the authority to one parent. Are we completely there yet? No.
So from your experience, so Ohio has many counties, right? So jurisdiction in Ohio for a domestic relations court, at a minimum, you have to live in Ohio in a specific county for 6 months.
So in order to file for divorce,
Correct.
you have to live in the state for at least 6 months, and
Okay.
you have to live in that specific county for at least 90 days before you file.
Are there counties that are more advantageous for example, moms or dads filing for complaints for divorce?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there counties that are
count-
more advantageous? Yes.
In
I
other
think
words,
so.
can individuals can they shop?
Forum shop.
Can they forum shop? Can they go and go move in the adjoining county? I'm not saying for our audience, don't do this, but can they technically choose? They can go around on the internet. They can talk to several lawyers, and each lawyer who practices at a particular county will tell them what a standard is for that county, right? You've
Correct.
practiced in several counties around the Dayton area,
Right.
and you know the standard practice for how courts issue spousal support, child support, look at custody matters, and it differs from different counties. So
Sure.
you would have to consult with somebody and said, hey, you live in this county. This is kind of how the lay of the land. If somebody wanted to, they can forum shop their case and move in and live there for
As long as
90
the other party is okay.
Well, if the other party, they don't know. What we talked about in this episode, if one party decided to move and they said, I got a job in an adjoining county and I got a really good rent, they don't know.
Right.
In 90 days, they get served with a complaint. That's feasible, right?
Well, I think that because in that situation where if somebody's moving, right, that would assume that they're no longer married, right? So in your situation, it's like, if they're separated or they've been separated
Sure.
for a period of time, and then
Or
they're
they've
just
never been
moving,
married. They're just
then yeah. And if they've never been married, then you're more so looking at around the 6 month mark for
Sure,
like going to
for
juvenile court.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, you could move into an adjoining county and say, or whatever county to forum shop, as long as you establish your residency for 90 days, you're technically able to file there. But do the counties differ that much when it comes to stuff? I mean, maybe a little bit, with respect to how they would address maybe parenting time schedules and stuff like that. But I mean, the equitable division of assets kind of is what it is.
Okay, 15-second answer. I need it real quick. Can grandparents file for visitation?
They can, yes. However, it's not guaranteed that they'll get it. There's certain circumstances where they would not be able to get it, and that's normally if you have two parents that are involved in a child's life. Then the court allows the parents to determine what the relationship with their grandparent would be.
Gotcha.
If you're still listening, click the subscribe button, get a like, make a comment. Lauren, thanks.
Ask questions.
Ask questions. Lauren, thanks for being here today. That's a wrap. Episode 015.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks,
Thank
Lauren.
you.
It's legal chaos.